Dawn in Clayton, New Mexico territory turns the courthouse yard the color of brass. A gallows stands there, new wood squared by men who measured more than once and prayed less than that. A hemp rope hangs from the crossbeam like a sentence already written. The sheriff and a deputy climb the stairs with a yardstick and a set of numbers somebody copied from a book about standard drops. They argue over inches. One mutters that their man gained weight in jail. The other says the figures don't allow for nerves, suits, or the sharpness of new rope. A black broadcloth coat waits on a chair. Down in the jail, a man tucks his left sleeve because there's no arm to fill it. Thomas Edward, Blackjack Ketchum, was never much for nicknames that arrived by rumor. He'd ridden the high plains as a cowhand first, learning the way wind talks before a storm and how to spot water by a certain lift of birds. When railroad money threaded the desert, temptation rode with it. With his brother Sam and a handful of hard cases, he took to stopping trains. They had a way of turning sagebrush and moonlight into cover, a way of making time slow down around a whistle post. Sam never came back from Turkey Creek, shot to pieces and dying hard over days. The gang shed members like a snake sheds skin. Tom kept the name people gave him and the habit that made the name useful. The law kept pace as best it could. On August 16, 1899, he picked a train near Folsom, the number, one on the Colorado and Southern, and tried to hold it alone. It was a poor plan before the conductor leveled a shotgun and fired. Lead tore into Tom's right arm and flung him off the cars like laundry snapping from a line. He crawled through cholla and dust to a ranch, delirious, where people fed him water and suspicion. The posse that arrived wore the look of men already done being fooled. In Las Vegas, surgeons took the arm. He woke to morphine and a stump wrapped clean, then to a cell and the hard arithmetic of a territory that made assault on a train a hanging offense. Not just murder, not just robbery. The act itself was a capital crime, a statute born from steel and fear, and Tom Ketchum fit it. Clayton took him in as a prize and a problem. He healed and got heavier. He wrote letters in a neat hand, asked after old acquaintances, and stared through iron at a yard that never changed. People came to look. A woman with flour on her sleeves pressed her face to the bars and asked him why. He said nothing at all. He enjoyed his meals. He laughed when the jailer told a true story and smiled when the man told a lie. The date circled closer, a fly that would not wear itself out against a pane. The law he met was formal and provincial at once. A court read the statute aloud, found it sound enough, and wrote the sentence that gallows wood knows how to read. In other places, a murder might earn life. In Clayton that summer, the rails spoke with a louder voice. It is not that the town loved to kill. It is that the railroad had rewritten the map, and a hand on a brake wheel had come to mean more than an armload of cattle or a sack of mail. Tom Ketchum had reached for that wheel too often. On April 26, 1901, the town woke early. In the yard at the foot of the scaffold, boots scuffed, and men pretended they had come only to be witnesses for the law and not spectators for themselves. The sheriff, nervous and dutiful, felt all his pockets as if they might produce another option. The drop had been calculated for a body that weighed one thing. The prisoner had grown soft at the edges in confinement, another thing. The rope was new, unseasoned, eager. Someone said they should shave the knot or trim an inch. Nobody did. They brought him out in the black suit and a white shirt the barber had pressed with care. The broadcloth looked like he was going to court, not to history. A minister asked him if he had words for God. He answered that God already knew him. To the men at the foot of the stairs, he offered a line that traveled faster than any train. "I'll be in hell before you start breakfast. Let her go. Last words always come polished by retelling. What is certain is the tone. Reckless, wry, meant to leave the crowd with something easier to repeat than the truth they were about to see. They hooded him, because that was mercy in those days, and because the photograph would look less like a man and more like a scene. The knot sat under his left ear, where the book said it should. The trap lever moved like a shrug. Bodies are physics before they are symbol. A drop too long becomes a blade. The rope snapped taut and did the arithmetic nobody upstairs had wanted to do. A few men lurched backward, hands to mouths. A few looked away and found there was nowhere to look but at the sky. The sheriff stood very still, as if stillness could be an apology. Somebody ran for a blanket, as if cloth could sew a story closed in time to save the town's appetite. The news outran decency. Postcards were printed. This is what the frontier does to its villains, some said. This is what incompetence looks like when you give it a yard of rope, others answered. The law answered with silence and paperwork. Tom Ketchum was placed in a box like any other body and buried under a little prairie that makes no promises. The gallows stood a while longer, a wooden sentence with nobody left to read it. Then it came down. The yard went back to being a yard. To tell the truth clean, you have to walk backward. Why was the rope too long? Because the man who measured was new to the craft, and the book he used didn't account for the softness of a prisoner kept well for months. Why was the rope sharp? Because fresh hemp cuts where old hemp gives. Why did he weigh more? Because a jail feeds a hanging man. Why did the statute demand his neck for a botched robbery where no passenger died? Because a territory had turned its fear of stopped trains into law, and fear makes poor policy when it sits down to write. Tom Ketchum's history does not fit into a single hole at the edge of a small town. He was a robber who scared crews and cost the railroad money. A brother who outlived a gang because he refused to change course. A patient whose stump healed tidy under a sheet he could not sign. A prisoner who learned the names of the men who watched him and never learned to betray what he thought. He had good days and mean ones. He wrote a letter to a woman he'd promised something to and crossed out half the lines. He was guilty of the thing the statute named and unlucky in every way the drop could measure. After Clayton, the law trimmed its appetite. The statute that made train robbers into hanging cases shrank and then vanished. Even the frontier learned to count cost more carefully. Sheriffs spoke quietly about the day and the photograph that would not die. Executioners in other counties softened their ropes, shortened their sums, or refused the work altogether. When the railroad moved on to a different kind of trouble, the memory of that gallows stayed behind like a caution nailed to a post. There are ways to be right that still leave you wrong. Stand in that yard now, and it is just wind, grass, a courthouse that became a museum, and then a story. If you listen to your own boots, you will hear what the deputy heard going up the stairs with the yardstick, the awkward drum of a man trying to get numbers to do the work of wisdom. Farther off, rails sing to themselves, carrying freight that does not know this place, and the desert does its one true job, which is to keep what it can and sand the rest down to something forgivable. Blackjack Ketchum left a headline, a photograph, and a problem. How to talk about justice when the instrument fails. How to weigh a life by more than statute and spectacle. How to accept that some endings are not warnings from God, but proof that men with tools can do damage in the name of repair. Deserted Trails is where you walk these questions to ground. You keep going until the gallows turns back into lumber, and a man whose name the wind still carries becomes again what he was first, a rider between towns, a fool for luck, a weight the rope could not measure without breaking. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.